Greetings, Starfighters. Yeah, I'm not looking forward to this one at all. Little Unicorn, starring David Warner and George Hamilton and blah blah blah. I've already I've not seen the movie, but I've seen enough. This is another one of the ones that Diamanda Hagen and Film Brain did a crossover on, like with Merlin the Return. And I've seen this review much more recently, like just late last year, so it's a lot fresher in my head, so I know what I'm in for, and I just this movie. I mean, even setting aside the misleading title, it's got like it has. I'm not kidding about this, by the way. Three pairs of villains, not three villains, not even six villains, really. Three pairs of villains. I'm still gonna watch it because that's this show, and also I'm probably again not going to find enough screen caps for it on Google Images, so I'm gonna have to get them myself. And I might find something in there that Hagen and Filmbrain didn't talk about that I want to touch on. But I'll be honest with you, folks. If you all decided to just sort of skip this episode and go watch their crossover instead, in fact, I'm going to go ahead and link to it in the show notes. I would not blame you, because watching them rip on it is going to be a lot more fun than hearing me complain about it. Because, I mean, I don't really think there's much that I could say about it that they didn't already. I mean, again, I might find something. I'll find out when I watch it later for this episode. But I think for the most part, when we get to the audio portion, I'm going to be talking about the season in general. Because as I remember the review, I mean, again, it is more recent in my memory than the Merlin the Return review, but it is also several months old. So a lot of things in this movie are sort of a microcosm with the problem with the Paul Matthews oeuvre in general. So I think when we get to the audio portion, I'm going to get into a lot of that. Because this season has been rough, folks. I mean, I'm sure you've noticed. Especially in the last episode and the first episode of the season, because those are the only episodes that got more than 25 views. But yeah, yeah, the Little Unicorn. Let's get through this. Alright, so I watched The Little Unicorn at 1.5 speed, and the hilarious plot summary you're about to get comes courtesy of IMDb. I'm going to leave in the inappropriate commas and the misspellings because, frankly, you're going to get more enjoyment out of this than I got out of the movie. In this story of magic and adventure, tomboy, Polly Regan is an orphan. Yeah, I don't know why I don't know why there's a comma after tomboy. Polly Regan is an orphan, and her grandfather has made a home for her on his farm. Her life is happy, though unconventional. A comma after though. No idea why. But Polly is heartbroken when she learns her favorite mare may also die giving birth. Polly wishes with all her heart for the King of Horses to intervene and save her mare and the foal, but her wishes seem to go unanswered and the mare dies. Polly is devastated until she sees the foal. The little creature is a real, honest-to-goodness baby unicorn, a magical creature created by state-of-the-art animation effects. Oh my god, they actually wrote state-of-the-art. Wow. Okay. It totters its way into Pole's heart spelled H-A-R-T, and also Pole instead of Polly, and into the affections of her grandfather. Pole's Aunt Lucy doesn't know what to think, either about the unicorn or about her niece's upbringing on the farm. She is certainly not prepared for the uproar that arises when a photograph of the unicorn appears in the local newspapers. The farm is inundated with sightseers. Her Policman fiancé, Policman, has trouble keeping the sightseers in check, and not everyone is a well-wisher. When Polly is sent away to school by her aunt, there is no one to protect the unicorn from those who mean harm. George Hamilton is one such person. He plays the great Alonzo, a magician whose life has run out of magic. His tricks are old and his jokes are jaded. I think they might have meant dated, but then again, jaded also works. Alonzo believes that if he can steal the unicorn's horn, he can steal the unicorn's magic. Aided and abetted by his ever-patient, ever-suffering assistant Maisie, Alonzo is determined to get his hands on the foal. Yeah, that was a thing. Somebody wrote that. Interesting choice to only include one of the 3 pairs of villains in the summary. Almost as if whoever was trying to bolster this movie was aware how little they all added to the story, such as it is. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed that because, like I said, it's more fun than the movie itself. One of the things I wanted to talk about with regards to these movies as a whole, not just The Little Unicorn, is the noticeable lack of black people. Not just in speaking roles, I mean at all. And I do specifically mean black, not just in all general people of color, and you'll understand why in a moment. Because, as has been pointed out to me by activists, if you're really only referring to one non-white ethnicity, then just say that ethnicity. Don't use the blanket term people of color. Anyway, so total lack of black people in these movies so far. And like, not just in speaking roles, I mean at all. Like, not even in the background. This would be problematic enough if these movies were filmed where most of them take place, which is the UK, or as is probably going to be known within the next 50 years, England and Cornwall. But here's something you folks watching this may not have known. Most, if not all, of the movies this season, including the ones we haven't gotten to yet, filmed in South Africa. South Africa. Now, of course, we know there are white people in South Africa. As of April 2021, certain weird nerds won't shut the fuck up about it. But these movies were made a good several years after apartheid ended, so, like, shouldn't we at least see some black people, like, at least in the background, if nothing else? If there were any in the previous films, I blinked and missed them. And this movie has considerably more extras than some of the other ones so far, and I think it was like an all-white crowd there. So, just, wow. Fucking yikes. Anyway, as for the average-sized unicorn itself, the movie this episode is actually about, in case you didn't see it when the title was up on the screen here, whoever designed it did a bad job. The word little in the title is so, little, you can barely see it, and it fades away after a few seconds. It's almost like the designer was warning us that the title was a lie and the unicorn we'd be getting would just be a normal-sized horse for about 99% of its screen time. During the opening credits, one of the film's main characters can be seen checking her watch out of boredom. This is foreshadowing for how David Warner is going to phone in his performance during this movie. The man showed more enthusiasm for the material he was working with in Star Trek V. This is also where we meet Polly, not Pole, who will be our main character for the first act of the film. I'd actually missed the Pole thing when I copied that summary off of IMDb. Wow. It's like not even like P-O-L, which could be seen as short for Polly, because they do call her that in the movie. She does get called Paul, short for Polly, in the film a few times. But in the summary, it is spelled P-O-L-E, as in like pole. Like a telephone pole. I just can't get over that. Okay. So this is where we meet Polly, who will be our main character for the first act of the film. Not the whole film, because that would make sense. She does come back towards the end, but anyway. Since the average-sized unicorn was birthed by Polly's favorite horse, but she'll be replaced about halfway through for much of the rest of the movie by a boy who we also meet in this scene. His name's Toby. We meet him when he accidentally hits Polly in the head with a soccer ball, and it's the same kid from The Sorcerer's Apprentice and Merlin the Return. Oh, joy. At least we're getting characters' names reasonably early in this movie. In past movies in this set, as I've mentioned before, we will sometimes not hear a character's name spoken out loud until the film is almost half over, but it's presented as if we should know it already, meaning that their proper introductions probably ended up on the cutting room floor. Granted, in this movie, this so far only applies to the child characters, but anyway, everything from the summary about the pregnant mare dying during birth, that all happens less than 10 minutes in to an 84-minute movie. And just to really drive home how fast this first act goes, we go from the local vet on the phone with David Warner to him walking into the house to sadly tell Polly that the horse is going to die in the space of 10 seconds. I counted. It goes from tell Polly not to worry to I'm sorry, Belle's dying, Belle being the horse, in less time than it took me to type this sentence. It is amazing the extent that these Paul Matthews movies can feel rushed and padded to fill the runtime all at once. That seems like it should be a paradox, but here we are. We first see the title unicorn during the very brief period it can still be called little, less than 10 minutes in. And given how bad the CGI looks, yeah, I can see why they wanted to get to the real horse the filmmakers used as soon as possible. Anyway, after the transformation from a cartoon foal to a regular-sized horse with prosthetics, we meet our first pair of antagonists, not mentioned in the summary, a couple of carnies. And we get another returning actor, as the henchman of the main carny is played by the same actor who played the leprechaun in The Last Leprechaun and the troll in The Magic Door. They want the unicorn, which they read about in the newspaper, for their shoddily run carnival that can barely afford to pay its employees. We are then rapidly introduced to our second pair of villains, George Hamilton and his bad British accent. I mean, George Hamilton and his assistant. These two did get mentioned in the plot summary. Probably because, apart from David Warner, Hamilton is the closest thing to star power that this cast has. And I bet a lot of you watching this have no idea who he is. Especially if you're like under 35 or... Anyway. Now, you might think that right after this we'll meet our third pair of villains, right? Nope. Instead, we go into the first round of bad slapstick shenanigans with the first pair. We do see the third pair after these have started, but I only know that that's who they are at this point because I saw the Hagen Film Brain crossover review of this turkey. They are a young woman named Penny and her mother. I forget what their motivations are, but I'm sure the movie will remind me, eventually. By the way, just to give you an idea of the level of intellect we're dealing with regards to our first pair of antagonists, they're going to try to snag the unicorn, which is the size of a regular horse, in broad daylight, while the man who owns the farm is at home, along with Polly and Polly's aunt, with a crowd outside and at least one policeman on the premises. The burglars from Home Alone would scoff at the incompetence on display here. I mean, in the space of about 2 minutes, these two chuckle fucks fall down about 6 times. And each time the movie clearly expects us to find it funny. I assure you it is not. But that's the norm for these movies this season. And it's not like I'm down on slapstick comedy in general, though I could see how one might get that impression from me this season. But my issue here is that the slapstick just isn't funny. I mentioned Home Alone earlier. I get laughs out of scenes from that movie that were played out of context on a recent episode of Legal Eagle. Or actually, no, I think that episode might be more than a couple of years old now. Fuck. Anyway. And that movie is quite a bit older than this one. And much of the comedy in Home Alone in general is slapstick. Honestly, having the bad guys in your movie do something dumb and embarrassing is probably one of the easiest laughs a comedy can get out of their audience. Even a mediocre comedy can manage that kind of thing once or twice. So the fact that the only laughs I get from the pratfalls, not just in this movie, but like in Merlin the Return, came from Diamanda Hagen and Film Brain mocking them in their reviews of those movies, that one and this one, is a damning indictment of Paul Matthews as a filmmaker. Speaking of slapstick, because we're not done with that shit yet, We don't get any of it quite yet from Penny and her mom, but Penny is such an idiot, it was really only a matter of time. I mean, really, take any archetypal dumb blonde character from a mainstream movie and give her a British accent instead of a Valley Girl one, and you've got a good picture in your head of what Penny is like. And I think, oh, hey, we have motivation here. I believe, yeah, apparently Penny's mom wants the unicorn to breed with her own horses. Okay, then. Soon, all three pairs of villains of this movie are in the barn with the unicorn, and just to show how utterly inept they all are, none of them is able to get their hands on the unicorn, even though the unicorn didn't use any of his magic. He does that later in the film, but here he basically just stands there whilst his attempted kidnappers are foiled by, well, themselves. And that's before Polly walks into the barn and sees them. So now the unicorn is outside. 2 of the 6 antagonist characters have been accidentally hypnotized into falling asleep, and 2 others are covered in something brown and liquid that's probably exactly what you think it is. Yeah, it's stupid shenanigans. It's a Paul Matthews movie, though, so, that's to be expected. Family drama stuff happens that I don't care about, and frankly, neither does David Warner at this point. My guess is the check hadn't quite cleared yet on this particular filming day. It's another thing that's the norm for these movies this season. I mean, the family drama stuff is a common thing in children's movies, like even good ones. I just mean family drama that I have no particular investment in. That is a norm for movies this season. On top of that, we have characters jumping to ridiculous conclusions based on no evidence, though sadly that's an aspect of this movie that is actually more realistic now than it was in 2002. We live in the dumbest timeline. I mean, Idiocracy is kind of a bad movie for the eugenics subtext that I did not pick up on when I first watched it, though in hindsight I probably should have. But, I mean, it was kind of right about the level of stupid we get to. What it got wrong, it's not the result of genetics, it's cultural. Back to the average-sized unicorn. So, the plot summary from the top of the episode, or the top of the audio segment of the episode, that really only covers the first half of the movie. It doesn't get any better from there, but that's hardly surprising, is it? Though, really, apart from Polly now being at a boarding school, there's not much different about the next half from the first half. More bad comedy as the 3 pairs of villains try to steal the unicorn again, of course, but only embarrassing themselves and anyone unfortunate enough to be watching this movie by extension in the process. The Carnies manage to be the ones that get him, though really only because the other 2 pairs of villains nearly kill themselves with their own stupidity. The unicorn, who was given the name Spike earlier in the film, doesn't take too kindly of this, of course, but doesn't use his established magical powers to escape because there's still about 22 minutes left in the movie. Eventually, all our named characters are at the carnival because the brain trust that is our first pair of villains advertised that they have the unicorn in their show, while still in the same county as the farm they stole him from. Also, I realized we never got the name of the lead carny till now, and okay, it's not in the credits, but it's on the sides of the vehicles, and he has my name. Not Arkle, my real first name. Yeah, just add insult to injury there, movie. Movie tries to shoehorn in a message about the mistreatment of circus animals towards the end, but it's incredibly brief. I don't disagree with the message at all. Let me make that clear. But, maybe spend more than 8 seconds on it if you're going to put it in your movie. That's all I'm saying. As SF Debris once said, I'd rather you disagree with me intelligently than agree with me while chewing on your own shoe. So, Spike is rescued, there's some E.T. shit, and I am not even kidding. Spielberg could sue. The music is even trying to sound like the score to E.T. The unicorn goes home, wherever that is, and the end. And believe it or not, my ending here is only somewhat more abrupt than the ending of the actual movie. Literally only one half of the three pairs of villains receives any sort of comeuppance, and that amounts to basically having a unicorn threaten him for a few seconds before flying away. Random thoughts I had while watching the movie. This is going to be a short one, folks. The vet from this movie played the cop in the last movie we looked at, The Fairy King of R. But I had to look that up to make that connection. Goes to show how much of an impression he made. At one point, the movie's three pairs of villains just stand around doing nothing. An apt metaphor for their contribution to the story. If the guy playing the cop looks familiar to you at all from the screen caps, although I think he's only in a couple of them, but that he's the male lead from Blue Lagoon. Final verdict. This movie sucks. See you next time for a movie called The Excalibur Kid. Have fun, stay safe. I'm out.